Let's talk a little bit about Gone Girl, specifically the new book. Um, One thing that reviewers point out in general about this book is that you refuse to sort of follow the rules, you know, that fit in the cookie cutter. One of the things that struck me when I read it was there's no good guy, there's no bad guy, not in a traditional way. And I know I think it's great that it's so popular because I think that a lot of publishers think readers just want to be told, you know, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and you don't do that. But was there ever any pressure for you when you were writing it to make like Amy more likable or Nick, you know, less of a jerk?
Right. I mean, I can honestly say, and not just because I'm being taped, that I have the greatest editor and in the world, and they were like, you write the book that you need to write, and early on in my career, there were always those kind of conversations when we were trying to sell Sharp Objects, even that conversation of like, you know, even the narrator isn't, you know, she's so messed up, and she's not necessarily like, I guess you're kind of rooting for her, but you know, she's not the spunky go-get-em sort of hero type, and I do think people still underestimate readers, and there's still that idea of, you know, who do you root for? Like, you know, you have to have someone on top or whatever. And I wanted to write about a marriage that was in trouble, and it was in trouble because these were two very challenging people who had joined themselves together, and that their very personality aspects were, you know, what was going to lead them into a bad place. And so no, I got no, you know, they were like, write the book that you need to write. And some people, you know, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I certainly, every once in a while, I make the mistake of scrolling through my Amazon reviews or scrolling through, you know, the online stuff. And when someone doesn't like it, it's because they don't like, you know, like, well, why would I want to read about these, you know, two characters, you know, like there's no one to root for. And, you know, so it's not, I wrote it knowing, you know, some people would not want to join forces with either of them.
Well, yeah, and it's fun because every review of this book, anyone who's seen a review, and we're not going to give anything away if you haven't read it yet, because there is a long wait list, but every review is like, I can't say more than this, you know, like 2 sentences. You have to read this book. But let's also talk about, in the last 2 novels, specifically Dark Places and Gone Girl, you've also employed multiple points of view. And what do you see as the strengths of that technique in terms of, you know, you as a writer?
You know, it certainly, for Dark Places, I knew I just kind of wanted to write, I knew I wanted to write the day of the murder and have it kind of lead up to that, and so I knew it had to be through the viewpoint of someone who was there. So I liked the idea of the mother who is dead. You know, she's dead from the beginning as she goes through her day, and the son who may or may not have killed his family, and I liked that suspense of bringing that immediacy there of that murder and making you feel like you were right there. And you know, with Nick and Amy, it was just definitely, I wanted to rotate between the two of them because I wanted it to feel like what marriage is, which is a very long he said, she said story, with each of them trying to, you know, each of them are writers by trade, and each of them are very clever manipulators by personality, and I like that back and forth of not knowing entirely who was telling the truth and who was spinning you and who was actually being genuine but not self-aware, and you know, all those different layers of ruse that we create for ourselves. And you know, we all do it. We all tell the story of our lives, and we have fashioned it in a very specific way, and that way may or not actually be true, you know, ultimately. So I liked playing with that, you know, that unreliable narrator between the two of them.
It's a lot of unreliable too, and there's 2. I actually like that a lot, the unreliable narrator. I read something recently where you wrote about, and you mentioned it a little when you were talking, how there's so few books out there with sort of those evil women characters, and even your female heroines, like you mentioned already with Sharp Objects, and even in Dark Places, the present narrator, are very flawed people. And maybe talk more about that and like how you feel like sort of it seems like you feel like that's a place you're sort of filling in literature today.
I have felt for a very long time that there weren't enough nasty women in fiction. That there were sort of the campy, vampy bad types that were, almost soap operatic and kind of unbelievable and therefore kind of dismissible. Or there were the, super crazy Looney Tunes, women who were also thereby kind of dismissible. And what I really wanted to write was a very scary woman who is not dismissible. I wanted to actually write someone who actually kind of chilled you. And, I think that's kind of underrepresented, that really unsettling woman, and there are those women out there. So, I wanted to kind of, that's what I've always been kind of wanting to delve into was to really try to capture that in a believable way of these this particular breed of female instability and evil.
So what does it say that it's the #1 bestseller in America?
I think it means people, I've heard a lot of we know these people.
Let's go though to the male perspective, because you do write convincingly from the male perspective in Dark Places. You wrote from Ben, the brother who's in jail, who may or may not have killed his entire family. And then obviously Nick, as you mentioned, in Gone Girl. Is it hard for you to get into the male character?
It's actually not. I mean, people ask me even now between Nick and Amy, they're like, who's more, which is more like you? Are you, and it's like, I mean, Nick is certainly closer to my story, and, he's a Missouri kid who, graduated from journalism school and went on to New York and wrote about pop culture, he's like, so, it's easy for me to slip into that for whatever reason. It's never been too much of a problem. And I do have I have my husband, and I have a couple very good guy friends who I can bounce things off on. Like, is this manly enough? Like, and every once in a while my husband just be like, a guy would never ever think this. Like, this just like in a million years, like just a quick line edit or something. But for the most part, it suits me pretty well.
I know you're married, and so after reading Gone Girl, though, I think it's relevant to ask you, how do you feel about marriage as an institution?
I mean, God bless my husband. I'll tell you what. It takes a strong man for when his wife comes to him and says, I want my next book to be about the darkest side of marriage and to really explore, the negative aspects and really play those out to the end. And he did not blink an eye. He just said, he's like, do not censor yourself, like, go for it, and I was careful not to use any aspects or specific things from our relationship. Because every once in a while, when we'd have an argument, I'd be like, oh yeah, this is going in the book, baby. I was like, no. Before it went out, well, he read it many times, but I said, I want you to read it one more time, and I would rather stay married than publish this book. So, if there's anything that makes you uncomfortable or feels too close to home, and he's like, it all kind of feels close to home. That's what I like about it. And I think that's what people are responding to, which is it deals with any long-term relationship. And it's the worst side of a long-term relationship, and it's taken obviously to extremes. But hopefully it's identifiable, those certain little power struggles and the give and take of any relationship and that's long term.